This is a piece of paper. You should all have one. It is a blank sheet. There is nothing on it. It is laden with nothing but possibility right now. And while I'm talking today, I'd like you to have a play. I'd like you to make something out of your piece of paper. I don't know what. Scrumple it up into a ball, or perhaps you can make me a paper aeroplane, or a boat. I don't mind what, but have a go. And I will try and walk and talk and make. It's going to be an interesting session. Back to the pursuit of uncertainty. What if, instead of saying, I don't know is a bad thing, we said that I don't know is an outcome in itself? What if, instead of thinking uncertainty needed justification, it was only the first step on the road to the road away from ignorance? What if instead we thought that it was a goal in its own right? What if it was okay not to know? What if it was okay to sit on the fence? What if it was okay not to know who to vote for? Not to know who to love? What if you couldn't tell the difference between spin and alternate fact, and that was all right? What if fundamentally the truth that I'm searching for was unknown? I'm a great fan of the serendipitous. The, oh, look what I found, as we meander through life. And mudlarking, the practice of wandering along the banks of a river and picking up forgotten shards and thinking about them, is one of my favourite conceptual sports. I love the idea of picking up something which is a couple of thousand years old. I love the idea of a fallen crown nestling up against a washed up paper bag. I love the absurdity. I love the possibility. But most of all, I love the uncertainty. I don't know what I'm going to find when I go mudlarking. And I would hate it if someone could tell me. The joy is fundamentally in not knowing. This is an image of the Thames at Cannon Street. Those with eagle eyes might be able to just spot in the distance a little bit of Tower Bridge. And this is a tray of things that I found when I went wandering a Sunday morning a couple of weeks ago. There's the whole history of London in it. We have, up at the top here, we have some green glazed medieval shards of pottery. On the left-hand side there, some blue and white ware. Some is Delft ware, hand-painted. Other is transfer ware, its descendants, made in England. There's bumpy Bellamy ware down at the bottom. There's stripy Bakewell ware. There is a chronology of London's history. But you know the thing that really links them? It's not just that I picked them up all on the same day. It's that they're worthless. There is no value here. Apart from the uncertainty. Apart from the fact that I know I will never find the rest of these vessels. I know that there's a possibility that someone might have a few of the pieces of these shards. How about these things down in the bottom here, in the bottom right corner? Can you see the little pins? Ancient, rusty. Who knew a 21st century mudlark was going to come across and pick them up and spot them? That's a different story. And then the little knobbles, the little bubbles that are there, those are garnets, semi-precious stones, uncut, and they're an anomaly. Nobody knows why you find them on this particular piece of foreshore in such profusion. I've asked archaeologists, nobody knows. Again, they have no value, apart from to a magpie mind like mine. A magpie mind like mine that wants to ferret out forgotten stories, that wants to perhaps assign meaning to objects. But those meanings and those stories are provisional. They are not certain. I don't really know who owned those pins. I don't know why they ended up in the Thames. And if the archaeologists can't tell me why those garnets are there in such profusion, well, I certainly don't know. It leads me on, however, to another of my favourite things, a Japanese practice called kintsugi. Now, kintsugi is the decision to mend with the precious. So you take a broken vessel, which perhaps has some kind of emotional value, and you mend it with gold, one of our most precious subjects. You make that mending visible. You make that mending extremely visible, in fact. It becomes one of the most beautiful things about the piece of pottery that you have. And obviously, when looking at an active pursuit of the uncertain, what a lovely metaphor mudlark's kintsugi could be. So I set myself a task. I decided to make a thing. I call it a thing because I certainly didn't know what it was going to be when I started. I took an oyster shell with its edges rubbed smooth by time from the Georgian era, and I placed little shards of pottery around it until it began to resemble, and as you can see, resemble is a big word here, a round. And then I decided to try and stick it together. And then I changed my mind a couple of hundred times. I started to try and make it into a vessel of sorts. But I forgot something. I don't have limitless access to gold, so I used glue and gold dust instead. I found a pretty blue shard of glass, which had been mineralized by the Thames and rendered opalescent. I found unlikely perfect fits. My hands started to become part of the process. I took on the mantle of maker. I lost a glove because I stuck it to the thing. I tried to make it more and more perfect. A thing began to emerge, but in the language of nursery school, it was perhaps a key holder or a candle holder. It was definitely not watertight. And worse than that, in all my enthusiasm, I'd forgotten I'd put all the pretty bits on the bottom. So actually, it's functionally useless. But it's still interesting, because the thing that kept on striking me was, how was I choosing what to keep and what to discard? How did I know which pieces were important and which pieces were not? How did I choose? And remember, I was specifically documenting this process. But at the end of it, I didn't know my rationale. How can I talk about the generative and powerfulness of uncertainty when I can't justify the reasons behind this? The answer perhaps lies in the profusion of objects that I brought from the riverbank, but also, I think more so, in the course that I teach at Kingston University in Fine Art and Art History. Every year, I bring in an amazing group of innovators, and the same thing strikes me. I usher them into 3 years of higher education, £50,000 worth of debt. How do they know they want to do it? How can they be so certain? How can they be so secure in their decision? If we think about experience and influences as the mudlark shards of our lives, how do they know which pieces to keep? How do we know which pieces to keep? I then, in the process of the course, I ask them to take positions on enormous philosophical debates, the kind of ones which don't have answers, the ones which are still going after 2,000 years of thought. And I give them a series of tools with which to decide an opinion. But they internalize some of those and they become part of that tray of kintsugi. But which ones? How do they know? How are they able to decide which bits of experience are important and which bits aren't? How do any of us make those kind of decisions? It made me think that maybe my thing wasn't what we needed. It made me think maybe we needed this. This is a mug from a well-known Swedish brand. It's cheap, and I took a hammer to it. I shattered it into a series of pieces, and I kintsugi'd it back together to make a watertight vessel. Why? Well, I was interested to see whether I would have an emotional connection to it. And the answer was strangely, yes. This thing that had no importance had somehow gained value by being made truly worthless and then repaired. But I wasn't comfortable with that as an answer, so I went to the mudlarks. This is an Elizabethan money box. It was found just outside the Globe Theatre, and it's complete. It has some cracks in it, but it was stuck back together. It is perfect. It is invisibly mended. It's a very different thing. It's a watertight, unassailable piece of history. We know where it's from. We know what it is. We are comfortable with its certainty. But I wasn't comfortable. The problem with both of these objects is they ignore the idea that there might be multiple possible meanings in every object. That doesn't work if you have completed things. And in the grand scheme of life, it's very unusual that we get a set of beliefs or a set of hopes intact. We generally make them. And I don't know is a large part of that decision-making technique. But how do we find these shards, these fragments? Where do they come from? Now, I've talked about my course, so there might be someone like me telling things which could be used as fragments, but it's also your parents, it's your children, it's those forgotten conversations on a bus, it's a pop lyric, it's a television program. They are all shards that can be added together to create a myriad, glittering kaleidoscope of possibilities. And so my first years could take the next door neighbour's dog and the way it barks as one shard, and a piece of obscure French philosophy on the other, and put them together to make something extraordinary. But how are they going to get through to a point that they stick together? So what is the glue that holds them together? For me, it's curiosity, and the gold dust, the thing that makes it truly precious, is that desire to learn. Now, where to go from there? It creates a sense of self, which is puzzled together, is placed in different ways. And actually, if we look at someone like Socrates, who said that the first path to wisdom, the first step on the path to wisdom, was knowing that you knew nothing, well, on that basis, I must be extremely wise as I stand here and advocate for the pursuit of uncertainty. But there's a caveat. I'm not saying that we shouldn't search for pieces of knowledge. I'm asking that we shouldn't demand that you know what shape they're going to make. Back to the foreshore. Tide and time work for no man. And that movement through time is one that keeps on catching the purity of I don't know. We don't know what time's going to throw up in both senses. But I feel like we need to validate I don't know at this point. I've talked about it in terms of generativeness. I've talked about it in different ways. So let's go to the late, great Douglas Adams. In his book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, he suggested that the meaning to life was the number 42. Now, for the tech people amongst you, you'll know that if you go to an ASCII computer program and type in 42, you get an asterisk. An asterisk. A wildcard search in a Boolean search engine like Google gives you anything, or I don't know. So I don't know is fundamentally the meaning of life. So I'm going to leave you with a manifesto. But first, can I just ask, has anyone made anything with their pieces of paper? Aeroplane, aeroplane, fan, very good, cool today, and a boat. I didn't know whether you were going to play along with me today. I didn't know, and it was slightly unnerving. But actually, that feeling of not knowing is wonderful. It's exciting. It's freeing. I don't know is suddenly meaning, challenge me, persuade me, bring me that horizon, I don't know what's over it. So I don't know is the meaning of life, and here's a couple of points to leave you with. Firstly, take a punt at it. Forgive yourself for the nubbliness of what you've made. This was meant to be a mouse. I think it looks a bit more like a rat. But you know what? It's interesting, and it's not that easy to talk and make origami. I've learnt something in the uncertainty. Admit it. When you don't know, say, I don't know. It's not a mark of failure. It's not a lack of success. It's a celebration of taking a risk, of giving yourself a chance to learn something new. And that means that if you get to the end of a long day and you've been looking for an answer and you don't know, that's not a failure either. Because what that allows is for you to add to your tray of shards. It allows for you to think of solutions to questions that no one's asked yet. Uncertainty allows risk-taking. Embrace your inner mudlark. You know that bus conversation I was talking about? That might be the key to an energy crisis. Allow yourself to glean the unexpected from wherever you find it. And finally, actively pursue the I don't know. Don't feel guilty. Don't say that you're sorry that you don't know, which is what we all do most of the time. I'm sorry, I don't know. Be happy you don't know. Allow yourself to be thrilled. Or don't, because fundamentally, I don't know.